Welcome to our event entitled For the Betterment of the World, Different Perspectives on Moving Forward. I'm Georgios Kostakos, Executive Director of FOX, the Foundation for Global Governance Sustainability. We're very happy to have you with us for this celebration of UN Day 2020, which this year coincides with the 75th anniversary of the United Nations. The event is part of advancing the UN75+25 Alliance, recently launched by FOX and dear partners like the Dice of India, with the aim to establish an intergenerational, cross-border global movement for a better UN and a better world in the next 25 years. The event's conceptualization and whatever we do at FOX is guided by our core mission of promoting a new narrative of hope for a more inclusive and fair globalization, a narrative that focuses on human well-being, resilience, and sustainability, unlike the paradigm that guides the unequal and unsustainable globalization of today. We thank you all for your participation and count on your support, moral and material if you can, so that we are able to continue and intensify our work. You can see on fox.org how you can contribute financially too, including via donations on Facebook or through our Patreon platform account. Back to our event, although it is about the UN, our guests do not work there, but the event's co-chairs, to whom I will soon hand over the microphone, have both had distinguished UN careers, personifying the ideal of the international civil servant in action. Richard Kinley is the president of FOX, and Yoriko Yasukawa, a member of the FOX advisory board. I will not attempt to summarize their very rich biographies. You can find them on the FOX website. Dear Richard, dear Yoriko, we are in your hands.
Thanks, Yorgos. I'm really happy to be here in this rather unique event, actually. I find it very exciting, especially given that at FOX we're trying to emphasize the importance of connecting the UN with citizens, with people of the world, that we have today a panel of very interesting, and if I might say intergenerational panel of people who are not UN, as Yorgos said, but who are activists, who are committed to the theme of our webinar for the betterment of the world. And we're looking forward to hearing from them in a structured discussion, which I will now give you a sense of what will happen in the next 90 minutes. We'll first start the event by introducing each of the panelists, giving you a sense of their background, and then asking them a really tough question to get to know them a bit better. After that, we'll move into a series of 3 segments, 3 substantive topics, one after the other. The first we are calling global governance, which is really about institutions and how we deal with problems in the world through institutions. The second is about global sustainability, another FOG's priority, how the world can live better in harmony with nature. And finally, global citizenship, how people relate to one another as citizens of the world and to their United Nations. Either Yoriko or myself, Yoriko is my co-chair, will be asking the panelists, 2 of the panelists in each of these topic areas, a couple of questions about their work, their background, their views, and how they relate to the United Nations. And then we'll have a chance for some more interactive input from those of you following on Zoom or on Facebook, and I'll just say a word about that later, how we will orchestrate that. So we'll go through these 3 sections and hear from all of our panelists, and then come to a final wrap-up session where each of the panelists will have 1 minute to share with us any parting thoughts, any impressions of the discussion, anything they want to highlight for the future as we mark UN at 75. With regard to the possibility of your submitting questions or comments, we have 2 ways to do that. For those of you who are following on Zoom, we would ask you to use the Q&A section. Enter your question or comment there. We have panel of some of our team are following these questions, and they will see, time permitting, select which ones we will have, which ones would sort of fit the flow of the conversation. Perhaps we'll have time for all of them if we're, let's be optimistic. If you're following on Facebook, please use the comment section. And again, our panel will be following these, and we'll we'll use the opportunity to draw on some of those questions to put to our panel members to respond. Without further ado, then, that's how we're going to carry on for 90 minutes. I would underline that we're very much committed to finishing on time, so we don't cut into people's other commitments. And I would then hand over to Yoriko to start with the introductions of our distinguished panel.
Hi, good morning from Costa Rica. Just to say, the internet today is a little bit sketchy, so if I'm suddenly gone, I'm going to ask Richard to take over. I hope that doesn't happen. But I'm also very happy to be here, and my job right now is to introduce the first three panelists. The first person I'm going to introduce is Wolfgang Spitta, who is a psychiatrist and a professional coach based in Bonn. Wolfgang works on the improvement of social and organizational systems to help develop healthier and more productive work environments. Wolfgang has coached and counseled both for-profit and for-purpose organizations, including the United Nations. So with that, I would like to ask Wolfgang to tell us what the UN and its 75th anniversary means to you and how it's relevant to what you do. You have 90 seconds. Your microphone, you have to unmute yourself.
I thought it might be. Okay. Well, I think the UN is a very important body that has to be taken very serious and should be developed, because at the moment the world is seeing through COVID and through the climate change that the idea of nations, groups and tribes doesn't help when the threats and challenges don't care about what people you are, what country you come from, and so on. So for me, the UN is a necessity to get kind of a holding frame in which these challenges can be discussed and solutions can be found.
Thank you. Our next panelist is Antonio Camara. Antonio is from Portugal. He is professor at the Faculty of Sciences and Technology at Nova University in Lisbon. He is a pioneer in the field of geographic information systems. He has also been visiting professor at Cornell and MIT, and he is CEO and founder of Y Dreams, which is a company dedicated to producing innovative products in information technology. He has been awarded the Pessoa Prize, which is the most important prize in Portugal in culture and the sciences. So, Antonio, can you tell us what the UN and its 75th anniversary mean to you?
Well, it's funny because I always start looking at the institutions through their impact in popular culture. So I look to the impact of the UN, and it's amazing because the UN is seen in more than 100 popular movies, TV shows, songs, and even video games as the place where problems can be solved. Even Superman went for the UN for help in one of its movies. And I really think that this reputation of an agency where problems can be solved is recognized at another level, because there are 12 Nobel Peace Prizes associated somehow with the UN. And of course, if you look to all these 75 years, everyone can recognize that UN has been, essential institution in solving conflicts and improving basic health, water supply, sanitation, and also improving education all over the world. And right now, with the challenges we are facing, its role, it's even more relevant and important. And most of the people recognize that, but there is also a common perception that UN must change. Actually, there is a common perception that any institution that we know must change. And I do believe that some change is necessary because we are living in very, very different times. And I really think the UN can be much more inclusive, transparent, and efficient. And those changes may be achieved through different paths and by aiming at different targets. And I really think that most of the time, institutions as the UN target, first of all, themselves. They target the countries represented by governments and parliaments, and ultimately the people. And I really think that the last...
Antonio,
yeah.
Maybe you can save part of that for your the panel discussion.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I had said 90 seconds, but actually you have
Okay.
30 seconds, so it's my fault. I'm sorry.
Okay, fine. No
yeah.
problem. I'll follow
So
up.
I have to go on to Cilene Victor in Brazil. She is professor in the social communication program at the Methodist University in Sao Paulo, Brazil. Cilene is one of the leaders of the research working group Humanitarian Journalism and Media Interventions. Cilene is also a representative in Latin America of the International Center for Developing Peace Culture and Rationality based in Qom, Iran. And as a journalist and researcher, she has focused on peace and humanitarian issues, as well as climate change, sustainable development, disaster risk reduction, and their impact on vulnerable territories. So Cilene, tell us about the relevance of UN to your work.
And firstly, I'd like to mention that I personally recognize the indispensable role of the UN in promote peace and social justice across the globe. And we can see it through the activities and efforts of the WHO to avoid the social impacts of COVID-19, for example. However, we can also recognize its flaws is more than failures, but its flaws, especially in peacekeeping missions. We have another example, especially in Latin America. It's also crucial to remember that UN and the other historic institutions have spent energy and efforts to defend their role amid growing public skepticism and criticism in different parts of the world. But as a professor and a journalist working and studying peace and humanitarian issues, I have to mention that it's impossible to imagine the world without UN, especially in this moment. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, everyone. So I will now pass the floor to Richard to introduce the other speakers. Microphone.
Yes, indeed. Sorry. Thanks, Yoriko. I'd first like to introduce Piera Van de Wiel. Piera is an award-winning singer and songwriter. She's an actor and a producer, has been an activist on humanitarian relief questions, on issues of women's safety and of mental health. She uses her music to effect social change at the UN, in other places, in hurricane-prone islands, for example, and in people's homes. And all of that for someone who is still very young person. Piera, I'd like to ask you, having performed at the UN, but as a young person who has lots of people-to-people experience, how do you see this 75-year-old organization at its birthday, and what does UN Day mean to you?
Thank you so much, Richard, for your introduction. So tomorrow we are celebrating UN Day and UN75. And it is about gathering public opinion, like us, all of us here today, and sort of trying to crowdsource sort of solutions to the global challenges that we're having. So personally, I'm very passionate about the SDGs and upholding UN's 2030 agenda. And with my company, Strong with Music, we promote the importance of music and social impact and music and mental health. And our current campaigns are revolving around gender equality, SDG Goal 5, and also climate change. So what I hope to do is to bring about collective social change and address important global issues through the power of music and the arts. And I believe that this can be one of the many vehicles in achieving solutions. And for the UN to also recognize that the arts can encourage action. And how can the arts, the creative economy, work towards a more sustainable future in tandem with the work the UN is doing?
Thank you. That's great. And I want to come back and ask you a bit more of that when we get into our discussion of sustainability. Next, I'd like to welcome Maria Papatheodorou, who is another young activist, fresh out of high school, just about to begin her university studies in Munich. She was a leader of the Fridays for Future movement, which achieved so much in Europe. She was active in Athens in particular, but also in Brussels. She's still active on climate questions and on other issues, including the movement for slow or low impact fashion. I wanted to ask you, Maria, so you've been active on the streets, so to speak, really trying to mobilize people to demand action. The UN may at times seem a long way away from these street actions or from activism. And I wondered, how do you see the UN at 75 and UN Day?
Well, since I'm very young, I really cannot imagine a world without the UN. And people my age might take it for granted that countries can actually talk to each other and engage in dialogue, which is really, really important. And well, the way I see it is that coming from a background of activism, one of the main things we do in activism is try to engage people in the decision-making processes, try to educate people about what decisions are being taken, and also what the whole procedures are in the world, and so on. And what I appreciate highly about the UN is that there are a lot of programs, educational programs, trying to engage especially young people all over the world. I think especially in a time where we have so much media, and so many different media platforms, and it's difficult for someone to see which information is actually right and wrong when a body like the UN reaches out and tries to educate people, especially kids who are mainly in a lot of social media platforms. The right information is actually filtered out. So yeah, I can actually not imagine a world without the UN. Of course, there's things that have to be adjusted, and there's a lot of work to be done, but it's always like that. Yes.
That's a really nice concept, not imagining a world without the UN, but that it needs work still. Our last panelist is Helen Gilbert. Helen is an academic and a curator in performing arts. She has taught at numerous universities in Australia, in Britain, in Japan, in Germany, and led numerous projects, been an activist on environmental issues, has a strong background and focus on the rights of Indigenous people and on Indigenous performance. She's recently been engaged on issues related to water, and she's very passionate about cultural engagement and interdisciplinary research. So Helen, an academic, but even more importantly, I think in our brief, having a brief period of recollection, of connection, I think as a strong people-to-people person and a critical thinker, what does the 75th anniversary of the UN mean for you and your work?
Well, I think the UN has been extremely important in providing a channel and a platform for marginalized peoples throughout the world. And this has meant that some peoples, particularly Indigenous peoples, have felt that there is a supranational body that is beyond the politics of the national, that they can go to have their identities confirmed and perhaps their issues given some profile. Now, that idea of a platform and a channel, I think, does need to be expanded. And I think at this point, it's a good moment to take stock of how well we include Indigenous peoples in the ideas of sustainability and development, and how we can listen to those voices. So I would see that as a very important future path. And thank you for inviting me to this panel to contribute my ideas on that.
Thanks, Helen. I think some of those points, I hope you'll come back to them when you speak about global citizenship, because they're really important. So that concludes our introductions. We can now move into the more substantive discussion. And Yoriko will now take over and lead us through the discussion on global governance.
Thanks, Richard. So before we get into the discussion, I understand there is a video produced by FOGS on global governance. So let's see that first.
We see the United Nations as the central node of global governance and an indispensable tool for tackling shared challenges. However, we believe that the existing institutional architecture is proving inadequate to tackle the issues that the world is currently facing. FOG's approach to reforming the UN focuses on two main programs. First, our UN2100 initiative puts forward innovative and practical ideas towards a modern, more agile and effective United Nations. With increased sense of purpose since the onslaught of COVID-19, FOGS has convened a series of brainstorming sessions with country representatives, former and current UN staff, academic experts, and civil society representatives to propose new policies, procedural and structural arrangements to improve the functioning and impact of the UN. Second, the recently launched UN75+25 Alliance aspires to bring together the experience of current members of the global governance community with the innovative spirit of young leaders and activists through live discussions and articles published on our online magazine, Kotoika's World.
Sorry. Before I ask the panelists to give their inputs, maybe for our listeners who aren't used to the jargon that we use in the UN, including terms like global governance, I guess trying to explain it from my own experience of working for many years in the UN, I guess we're talking about the set of rules and institutions agreed on by all countries in the world to help us organize how we live together, how we interact with one another, hopefully in a way that's peaceful and that also benefits fairly and equitably all of us. So with that, I would like to ask first Wolfgang to give your inputs. You have, as a psychiatrist and coach, tried to help develop healthier and more productive work environments. And I understand that you have thought about innovative ways to reorganize the way that the UN is organized, both outwardly and inwardly, in a way that's different from the kind of rigid hierarchical way that it's organized now. So could you tell us some of your ideas on how to do that?
I think one of the important differences from organizations like the UN is these bureaucracies and these hierarchical organizations are very new. The first department in the organization was invented in 1870, around that, by Siemens for the first R&D department. Before that, you had just groups. And the oldest form of organization is the tribe, since millennials. And you see this happening in all organizations, that you get tribal structures, which is then called silos. You have this program, this organization, and that. And then they tend to exclude other points of view. And I see that the challenges that appear are more and more inter-challenges, which need the cooperation between different points of view, different perspectives, different knowledges, like climate change has an influence on people, has an influence on desertification, and so on and so forth. So that I think the idea of these structure in different silos isn't helpful for the challenges, but as the world has shifted more and more towards the projectification and working in networks, and as you see with younger people, you get them interested in working together in attractive projects where they think the goal is worthwhile. It's better to think about how to shift more from the hierarchical structure towards a project-driven, goal-driven and outcome-driven structure, where you then, according to the outcome you want to achieve, look who should be included, which in a way is going away from the importance of hierarchies. And this also has to do with a lack, kind of a loss of status by having positions. And I think this will be an obstacle to be overcome, because in big institutions like the UN, there are also a lot of people who thrive on having status, which is more important than achieving goals.
Thank you for being so concise, and I can definitely identify with everything that you say, having worked as a UN resident coordinator, which involves trying to coordinate dozens sometimes of different agencies to work toward the same goal. So it would be great if you could work with those country teams at some point. So let me go now to Antonio. As someone who works in the development of innovative information technology products, I understand that you have also thought about a novel way for the UN not only to organize itself, but to reach out to people, and especially to young people, using technology, and including games. And I find that really fascinating, having a son who is 19 years old, who very much lives in that world, but who's also enlightened me about how games are much more than just shooting at people, but has a lot of interesting content that makes young people think. So can you explain to us how you would do that, how you would make that work for the United Nations?
Well, thank you. Again, I mean, you know, the United Nations governance system is, you know, basically dialogues in each country with the national governments and the parliaments. And I've been working with the Portuguese Parliament on how to approach the Parliament to the people, you know, and I really think that if you look at the UN, why not go directly to the people, of course, in cooperation with the national governments and parliaments in a completely different way. I mean, we live in a digital world where all these hierarchies and bureaucracies don't make sense for the ultimate users of that world, you know, and you know, so I really think that as a form of communication, many years ago, Al Gore proposed one digital Earth that basically inspired the Google Maps. I really think that once again, we have to go back to probably a different digital Earth, and this time not a mere collection of data that you can browse through maps and so forth. I really think and that's the reason I proposed the video gaming. Video gaming is the perfect language for this current generation, and I can see the UN developing global platforms that are actually games, where it can interact with the real people all over the world in subjects like, you know, this pandemic or global change, or even, you know, in different forms of education, you know, and that is probably something that, of course, is quite has lots of problems and obstacles. But I really think that we should be bold, and the UN at 75 should be more like at UN at 15, or us at 15.
Thank you. That's such an interesting idea. And it seems to me that both Wolfgang and yourself have in common this idea of the necessity of breaking through the structure that's based on power, which again, you know, it can be difficult because people, once they have power, you know, nobody wants to let it go. So I think what we might do is first go to see if there are any questions from the floor and also through Facebook. If Arturo and the other colleagues could let us know.
No question for the moment, Yoriko.
Okay, okay. Then why don't we see if any of the other panelists have some comments on this issue of global governance. What about you, Piera? Yes.
Antonio, I love what you were saying regarding like your video gaming idea. As video gaming is also a part of the creative and orange economy, and it's something that we can definitely dive into to be bolder in what we're using in order to sort of help the system make sense and be relatable too, as you were saying, like if you're 15 and have that definitely addressing to more of the youth. And with the work that I'm doing with Stronger with Music, it's again part of the creative economy. So I love what you were saying in regards to sort of implementing this video game strategy, which I think would be so incredible.
Well, thank you. Yeah.
Less of a question, more just agreeing exactly with what you were saying, let's be bolder in how we're going about our strategies.
Thank you.
Do Cilene or Helen or, oh, Richard. Yes. Microphone.
Thanks, Yoriko. And thanks to both of the panelists for their interesting remarks. I might ask so both of you for a quick reaction. Antonio, you said earlier that you felt that the UN needed to change, and Wolfgang, you were also commenting on some of the shortcomings in the UN. Since this is a segment that's talking about institutions, what do you think would be the one change that you would like to see the most that would make the UN more relevant for people in the world?
Well, if I can answer first, you know, as I said, we live in very much in a digital world, you know, and I really think that UN does fantastic work across the board, you know, but its digital presence reflects the hierarchical and bureaucratic structure. You know, you go to the web and you have to look for, you know, the different agencies like you do in a normal physical city. So I really think that the first change I will do, and that will be unbelievably powerful, is totally change their digital presence. I mean, because the UN is like, it could be like the newspaper of the world. You know, it's where we see the problems, and we see the problems that affect us globally are being solved. And right now, what you have is like a site of university with the different departments, you know, and you know, and you go to each department and you see the person and you see the problem. So I really think that the major change in the UN will start to be the digital presence, because that will force the institution to change itself. You know, and that's...
Yeah, thank you very much. Wolfgang, what about you?
Well, I have two directions. One is the direction of how does the UN look at itself? Because I think in a way the UN itself is the biggest human experiment, whether it's possible to work together by keeping your cultural background. And I see this in my work as a staff counselor, how very, very difficult systems of value, of importance, of the importance of status, and so on and so forth, is with the clients that are already in the same UN organization. So in a way, I think this is a good area to research. How is it possible to do that? And then use this as kind of the laboratory for the world to learn how different cultures can cooperate without giving up the cultural background. What common goals are there? And then you can talk from the experience of the UN itself, which I think is helpful in doing the research in the organization and then doing the rollout afterwards.
Thank you so much. I definitely, having come from so many years of working in the system, it would be great to have a much freer environment where people can feel safe and encouraged to give diverse opinions and experiment with different ways of reaching out to the world. So I hope this can happen. Richard, I just wanted to check with you. Should we move on now? Have we used up our time?
I think we're at the margin, but maybe we could take just 1 minute. We have a question from Professor Roberto Chiacchieri on the UN and Brazil and the pandemic. And maybe we could quickly hear his question and maybe get a quick reaction. Arturo, okay. Can you make that happen?
Yes, sir. Just a second. Professor Chiacchieri, you have been granted a voice. If Professor Chiacchieri doesn't want to speak, maybe I can read the question myself.
Yeah, go ahead.
We live in a difficult political situation in Brazil. We have a denialist president about vaccinating the population against COVID-19, for example. Is there any possibility for the UN to guide the Brazilian government towards making it understand that the prevention of this disease is not regional, but a global concern for the betterment of the world?
Antonio, maybe you could think about how your ideas about reaching out to people in more innovative ways can help mobilize the population to make that happen through and get the UN to move on it too.
Well, I know Brazil very well. You know, and I really love Brazil, and and I know the political situation right now there. And and the problem in this type of situation is that the people that you are going to reach are probably the ones that already believe on vaccination, and are not in denial. So I think it's very similar to what's happening in US. It's really a really tough period. And I really think the only way to go is through schools, because the children are the ones that are open to change. So I really think that you have to target the children, so the children change the parents. And that's what happened in Portugal, some decades ago. The education changed the children, and the children changed the parents. And I think it's the only way.
So I assume that Piera and Maria have taken very careful note of that, and will get to work on all of us, or even more work. We'll now move on. Unfortunately, we have a couple more questions, but I think we have to move on because of the time. And we'll move into the segment on sustainability, which is, as I said earlier, about living in harmony with nature. We have, I think, well, first, before we move into the discussion, we also have a FOGS video on this topic, and I would invite you to enjoy it now for a moment.
FOGS works closely with partners around the world to ensure the successful implementation of the UN Sustainable Development Goals and the transition to a fair and inclusive globalization. Partnerships with organizations in India and Greece have already led to several joint webinars and publications concerning poverty reduction, gender equality, renewable energy, and climate action. The COVID-19 pandemic demonstrated beyond doubt the fragile character of today's economic model, which maximizes profit and efficiency at the expense of human resilience and well-being and environmental sustainability. Our upcoming projects include creating a system of assessing business practices against the moral principles outlined in the Hexalog.
So we have in this segment Cilene and Piera, who are going to enlighten us, I hope. Maybe by way of introduction, I won't repeat the litany of global environmental and sustainability challenges that we're facing. I think everyone is well aware of these and the fact that many of them are interrelated. On the one hand, it's possible to point to a number of quite significant achievements by the UN. I think here we have the Paris Agreement, the Sustainable Development Goals, Agenda 2030, all of which were carefully prepared and are pointing the world in a good direction. On the other hand, reality check, implementation of all of these is weak, and the global problems are all getting worse. With this background, I'd like now to turn to the panel, perhaps with a sense of what can we do about this real challenge that we're facing. Cilene, you're not only a professor, but also a journalist. You've been very active on SDGs and Agenda 2030. What do you think, as a journalist in particular, that can be done to build engagement and support for these initiatives? How can we take them to another level?
But I'd like to divide, yes, I am a journalist, but I am a professor too, and I'd like to divide my answer into parts. As a professor for 25 years now, and also as a journalist for three decades. And my answer is through the lens of the humanitarian and peace journalism. As a professor, I have contemplated the SDGs in my journalism classes, preparing future journalists to deepen their understanding on Agenda 2030 and its goals. I have, for example, I have tried to show them when we write or produce news about poverty, gender inequality, food insecurity, peace, justice, or the absence of basic sanitation here in Brazil or in Latin America, for example, we are talking about sustainability, which the current meaning is more complex if you compare to the one adopted in 1987 in the Our Common Future report. Now, my answer about my role as a journalist covering especially displacement by conflict, disasters, war, climate change, I have tried to give a voice to victims, to the people in need, their community leaders, and humanitarian workers. This is really a modest way of trying to humanize suffering, as well as demanding the commitment of a local, yes, Brazilian or global leaders when they adopted Agenda 2030 5 years ago, but the Paris Agreement too, and Sendai framework too. And we must rescue our moral commitment to humanity. And this is what I have been tried to bring to journalism, yes, to my news, to my activities as a journalist, but as a professor too. I believe that the road is long. We have many challenges here in Brazil, many challenges I had here or in different parts of the world, but we must insist on a design for global sustainability, starting to remove people's suffering of invisibility and opacity of the media and the political spheres. And I'd like to mention example, since 2016, Roberto Chiacri, my friend, Professor Roberto Chiacri, and I haven't taken a journalist student to cover climate change. And when we go to cover climate change conference, we have tried to give a voice to different people. Yes, it's not the same people, the same narrative, the same approach about what the rich countries think about climate change, but what ways you have to adaptation and to build the resilience of these people in need or the people in vulnerable territory. This is my.
I think that's really, really good to hear, this idea of rescuing a moral commitment to humanity. I think, and that's part of the things that we're trying to do at FOGS, to reconnect the UN, global institutions with people. We might have time to come back for a follow-up question, but now I'd like to go to Piera. Piera, you've been active on several aspects of sustainability, but in very non-bureaucratic ways, if I may call them that. How do you see, you were alluding to this a bit in your introduction, how do you see music and the arts contributing to the change that we need in the world and to confronting these huge sustainability issues that we're grappling with?
Absolutely. So what I wanted to start off with is that next year, the United Nations have declared that 2021 is the International Year of Creative Economy for Sustainable Development. So it is evidence that they see it as being at the forefront of the agenda, which is very, very encouraging, specifically with the work that I'm doing, and I know a lot of other artists are wanting to do. Art has the power to comfort and also the ability to confront difficult issues, to create community and also shared understanding and also contextualize hard situations. But it also has this humanity aspect to it, as we can evoke, we can empower, we can bring you on our journey through the inclusion of personal stories, using whether it be theatre, film, art, music. So when policies are made through the UN, through other organizations, through government, of course there has got to be substantial evidence and scientific fact with mathematical deduction and proof, because that is essential for problem solving and of how we move forward sustainably. But the question is that doesn't inspire people with the mission. What can we do? What can we, the creative economy, what we are now known as the orange economy, how can we translate the numbers and the facts and the figures into sort of this vital messaging through art? And how do we translate that policy into action? And I believe that that is through the arts, and well, for me, through music. And one of my campaigns that I'm doing currently at the moment is Used. One of my songs, Used, I released it back in Mental Health Awareness Month, and it's been raising awareness of domestic violence during the increasing rates of IPV, intimate partner violence, during COVID-19. And what I wanted to do was to use music as a tool to bring awareness to women and girls suffering from violence all around the world during COVID-19. And what I've now done is, with my official video, which is actually being released on the 2nd of November with the Canadian Women's Foundation, is I have included signs within the music video of domestic violence. So when people watch it, they can recognize those signs. But I've also included this signal for help that was created by the Canadian Women's Foundation, which is a hand gesture, which is basically a distress signal to alert violence and abuse. And I've included women from diverse backgrounds from different countries performing this gesture. So basically, coming back to what Cilene was saying, is this commitment to humanity is including, whether that be women, girls, men, anyone, youth, into what we are creating and putting forward. And I think that's so incredibly important. And I believe that the arts do have this power to enable us to move forward, to create more of a sustainable world.
Thank you. That's I find really exciting. Maybe we'll get a bit deeper on both of your answers. In response, we have to a question that's coming up from Sean. Sorry, I need to. Yes, from Sean Bennett. Arturo, could you give Sean the microphone, please?
Sean Bennett, please, you can ask your question.
Excellent. Can I be heard?
Yes,
you can.
please go
yes,
ahead.
Perfect. So thank you very much for what is already a very interesting panel. So I was just wondering, how can projects, UN projects about sustainability, like the Paris Agreement, like the goals, be made more publicly engaging as opposed to existing at this governmental and international level? I know from experience that people, even if they know about these things, feel slightly detached from them. So how can we build on them at a grassroots level?
So I would ask both Piera and Cilene to come in with a quick answer, and invite Maria, if you're interested, since you really have a lot of experience in this area, if you might like to make a comment as well. Cilene, would you like to go first? There, you seem to be on now.
Now it's okay. Thanks for the question. I believe that you have, for example, from my perspective as a journalist, the first step is to remove some agreements of the opacity. Sometimes we use the, for example, the expression invisibility, the media invisibility. But I believe that's not invisible, but there is some, it's a weak narratives about global sustainability. And then, for example, here in Brazil, 100 million inhabitants are living without access of a basic sanitation. Yes, and you have 50 million people living in poverty and 30 million in extreme poverty before the pandemic, of course. But this is not about invisibility of the reality, but there is this opacity because we don't have a voice of this of the people we need. Always we build narratives in the media or on social media, for example, from the perspective of the political departments or on the international organization. But the main important is give a voice for the people we need, people in vulnerable territory. This is my idea to start this discussion.
I think that's extremely important, to give a voice and to give a positive story that change is in everyone's interest. Piera.
I definitely agree with giving a voice, and something that, I mean, I am linking back to music, but something that one of my music teachers taught me is that singing is communication in note. And I definitely think that's important when it comes to these messages that we're putting across, but also to the fact that we need to sort of stand up and have our voices heard, but then also sort of reflect on that and also be able to sort of appreciate this art of listening and sort of tasting these intricacies that we are learning that are around us in order to augment our awareness, to generate hope.
And Maria, did you want a final word?
Yeah, I wanted to add that, okay, from my own experience, when I tried to explain what the SDGs are and try to connect people with the idea of sustainability and that there are these different topics that need to be adjusted on, they tend to not understand, because when they see that, it's just a number of colorful boxes with numbers and a word or two. And it's funny because, okay, for politics and for governments to get into a topic and to find a solution on that, sometimes they need to cut somewhere the topics and have the different issues and take them on one by one. But in daily life, it's not like that. You don't have one issue and you're dealing with that 5 minutes long, and then you have the other issue. It's often everything at the same time. Just like climate change might affect the fact that I cannot use my bike to go to school, for example. So we need to, when trying to connect people with sustainability and the SDGs, which is very, very important, we need to come up with a story to tell them. We need to explain to them how that actually affects them 100% all the time of all of their day, and give them a story, a image. That might be music, that might be any kind of art, that might just be an example of everyday life. But yeah, that is very much needed. So yeah.
Great, thank you, everybody. I think we had a really good exchange around that. And now, Yoriko, I would hand the ball back to you for our next segment.
Thanks, Richard. So the next segment is about global citizenship. And as with the other segments, we'll first watch a video produced by Fox.
A better world has meaning and can be achieved only when it involves the actual people who inhabit it, or approximately 8 billion of us at this stage. We aspire to promote the rise of a consensus global citizenry, who are aware of and act upon both their rights and their responsibilities. To achieve this, education is a core tool. Fox plays a central role in the COVID Education Alliance, or COVIDEA, that brings together experts in digital technologies and education to help align education systems to the requirements of a rapidly changing world. Most, if not all, of our activities in the other two issue areas also have a citizen engagement component. The UN75+25 Alliance, for example, brings together citizens of different generations, while our country-specific work on the SDGs also tries to engage, especially the youth. In this community-building effort, our online magazine Katoikos.world offers a platform for dialogue through opinion pieces, analysis, and cartoons. Our webinars and other events, often co-organized with our esteemed partners, also promote dialogue and the search for solutions to shared challenges. By encouraging an open discussion across our events, Katoikos, and social media, we hope to build a global community committed to reshaping the world for the better.
Great. So on global citizenship, while I was working with the UN, I always felt that supporting ordinary citizens, empowering them to do their part, to exercise their right, to participate in an effort to make their communities, their countries, the world a better place, was part of our job. And I think the UN is, in terms of rhetoric, formally very much for that. But I also found that it was very frustrating that when it came to supporting citizens who had opinions that differed from the government and other groups in power, then the UN tended to become very timid and very cautious. So that was one frustrating part of the experience. And we're going to have Maria and Helen speak in this segment, but going first to Maria, in your experience as an activist, for example, with Fridays for Future, did you feel supported, accompanied by the UN? And what ideas would you have in terms of getting the UN to better support citizen participation in these issues that are of importance to the world?
Okay, well, first of all, it's very important to have active citizens, because that's the basis of democracy. If you don't have everyone being active and engaging in society, you don't have a society that is functioning. And well, the basis of activism when trying to make more people active citizens is to try to educate them. Well, when thinking about if the UN specifically helped me to do this, I don't think I don't know how to answer specifically, because okay, of course they have an archive, of course they have platforms, information they try to give out to the people. So in that idea, yes, I felt like the UN helped me, to guided me kind of in what should be done, what are ideas that are what the idea of sustainability, for example, that came from the UN, and it has also it explains also what the SDGs are and so on. So for a person like me, who I'm already active and I can reach out to these platforms and to that information, that was very helpful. But it's not like the UN came up to me and was like, okay, hey Maria, how can we help you engage more people in this? I feel like on education, the UN has different platforms, and also platforms that can help people come evolve themselves, that are already interested, but not so much people that have no idea. I feel like a thing that the UN could do is maybe create another body that engages 100% with trying to help people that are trying to engage other people into being active citizens, and have different programs, also on a worldwide level, on an international level, like this. One other thing I felt while doing activism in Greece is that I really did activism in Greece and not all over the world. And in the end, when we have a topic like climate change, it's really all over the world. So yes, one of the things that I could imagine and see the UN doing is really creating an outreach program in close collaboration with the different activists in worldwide. Yeah, that would actually be pretty cool.
Great idea. Although watching Fridays for Future, I think you've done a phenomenal job of connecting without any help at all from the UN. So that's impressive. So with Helen, I was interested in your views on, you worked a lot with Indigenous people. So have I in my work with the UN, and in trying to, including helping them negotiate on their rights with governments and so on. But from the outside, how does the role of the UN look in terms of engagement with the Indigenous peoples, and working with Indigenous peoples? How do you see that they feel? How do they see the UN? Is it supportive enough of them? What more can the UN do to make sure that their voices are heard in discussions on global issues and about their own rights too?
Thank you. I think the UN has been seen as an important body for recognizing and making more visible what Indigenous people have to offer to all kinds of debates, particularly about sustainability, and particularly in terms of the local knowledges that Indigenous peoples can bring about their own territories, their own nations to that debate. But what I think the UN needs to do better is to recognize the incredible diversity and amount of information and activism already out there among Indigenous people. There are many initiatives that actually go under the radar. They are sometimes visible on social media, but quite often they happen through a trans-Indigenous international network that may not necessarily seek or have access to more mainstream platforms. And so I think there's room for if you like, not reinventing the wheel, but recognizing what's there. And for that, we need to approach things humbly and to do our homework and to recognize that there are different ways of seeing the world, and indeed different ways of actualizing or performing that idea of citizenship, and different ways of looking at governance, because the structure that the UN and that the West in general tends to present has many benefits, but it may not always include different ways of looking at the world that have very long histories and a grounding and a sense of belonging in particular local experiences and very, very long histories of governance that might be not termed that, but seen in another form.
Thank you. I think that you're absolutely right in that in working with Indigenous peoples also, and in general, I think there's a view of the UN as a forum for the elite from different parts of the world. And I think the same thing happens with Indigenous peoples as well, that we tend to engage more with those who have access to those global forums, which, you know, really are a minority, and there needs to be more of an effort to reach out to others. I think there is a question.
Yes, we have a question from Yusuf Baluch from Pakistan. Yusuf, if you would like to ask a question, you can talk. And if not, I can read the question.
Yusuf, can you use your microphone? I guess not. So maybe Arturo, you can read the.
So Yusuf wanted to get some suggestions and some opinions about how we can manage issues like I am with my friend and we were asked to leave when we were protesting peacefully for climate change in front of the Mary House and the army asked us to leave. Yusuf is asking how they can manage issues like this.
Is the question about how the UN can help deal with those situations?
I would think that it's more a question directed for our activist friends who may have been in this situation.
Okay, so Maria, maybe you can share some of your experiences.
Well, I really can, when the army comes and asks you to leave, I think the answer is you should stay there and protest, but it's very dangerous. So at some point you should really leave. You should give the point of, okay, we actually want to resist, but the army is something very dangerous. And so you bring across your opinion and your message, but after a point there's also other ways you can approach and trigger change. And it's sometimes you have to lose a small fight in order to win a war. So it's better to give your message, and then when the police or the army asks you to leave, you leave after a while, and then you can continue bringing across your message, because if something happens to you, then you won't be able to continue giving across your message, right? And there's always a lot of different ways other than protests where you can connect with people and educate people about these things, and also pressure the government if that's the kind of activism you want to do. So, yes.
Thank you. I just wanted to, comment that on the part of the UN, I think when these situations happen where there is a confrontation between state institutions and citizens, And the UN is often very wary of getting involved in these situations because they're sensitive and volatile. But I think it is important for the UN to stand by those organizations working for human rights and for the common good. Even if it doesn't speak out directly against the government, it's a message that, you know, they're accompanied, that the UN is with organizations that stand for its ideals. So there is another question that is about the UN and its inclusion of persons with disabilities. And I know that there have been efforts in this direction, but maybe one of the panelists would have a suggestion on how to do that better.
Renata, go ahead. You can ask your question.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Arturo. My question is, as an inclusive journalist, I am also a student from Professor Cilene Victor in a master's degree, and we research about the social and professional inclusion of people with disabilities, not only in Brazil, but in other countries. I have come to understand this role of the UN in creating programs that support this inclusion. But as well, even though they have a special program, a special department taking care of this team, you know, I feel that we still have a long way to come for that really happening, especially in Latin America, in countries with where these people are in more vulnerable situations, like Middle East and countries such like that. So my question is, how can we approach this discussion? How can we approach the UN to this minority in a way that we can promote new policies or new programs to make that inclusion really happen, especially in non-developed developed countries?
Sorry. Would somebody like to address that question among the panelists? Maria?
Okay, so there's a activist group of disabled people in Greece, and I once went to one of their. They really try to raise awareness about their needs and about more inclusion in society. And one of the first points they said is, first of all, engage people who are disabled in the discussions of what disabled people actually need. So that is one way I could imagine, also especially the UN, that they could do is, if there's a discussion about disabled people, okay, maybe call the activist groups of disabled people, because there are these activist groups. And another point their coordinator mentioned was that there has been different programs where schools, for example, or government buildings or museums and so on, try to be more inclusive through putting ramps or so on inside the schools. But in something so basic as television, for example, and the news one can watch on television, usually there is no sign language, for example, or there's only sign language for very, very specific dialogues, and then there is not. I mean, we, for example, here, we don't have sign language either right now. So one of their main points in how to be able to engage disabled people more would be specifically for people who cannot hear, sign language. I know that sign language is embedded in TV and so on more in some countries than others. In Greece, it's not that much. I can imagine that in developing countries, it's even less. But for example, I heard yesterday that Pakistan is trying to do a program for schools where the lessons are actually happening on television, because that's something that almost every household has, no matter how poor it might be. So their sign language could also be implemented, for example. Yes.
Thank you so much. I think we have to, can we give Wolfgang the floor for 30 seconds?
Yeah, 30 seconds is fine. I think there are two further things around disabled people. I think one of the dangers is that, this is talking as a psychiatrist, if you talk about disabled people, you define the disability as the most important characteristic of this person. And the other thing is, what is a disability? For instance, all these narcissists who are a danger to the world have a disability in their narcissism, but is not seen as a disability. So I think you have to watch out that you don't use language to define people in the wrong frame.
I think that's an absolutely crucial point. Thank you for reminding us. So thank you for this great discussion. A lot of really concrete and practical points, I thought. So I will pass the floor on to Richard now.
Thanks, Yoriko. And thanks to everybody for a really diverse and interesting range of issues that we've put on the table and put our heads around for a little while this afternoon, this morning, this evening. We're now into the final section of our webinar with the closure looming. And as I mentioned at the outset, what we're going to do now is go to each of the panelists and ask them for a parting thought, a 1-minute takeaway that you have either from things you heard in the conversation today, or things you would like FOGS to act on, what you think the priorities should be as we go into the celebrations tomorrow of the 75th anniversary. And I'll just go through the list as we had it, and that means we start with Wolfgang Spitta. Please, Wolfgang.
Okay. I think my perspective is that you should develop kind of like the Dutch built their country. You start where already there is land, and then you build from there. And looking at the future, I see that especially the young people are so open and so much interested in helping each other. If you look at YouTube and so on, there's so much of giving and of helpfulness. And it's more about coordinating all the positive that there is. It's not about you have to kind of start it. It's more like you have to manage and coordinate it. Because for me, there is so much solidarity and so much chances and so much helpfulness in the world that this has to be used as the material.
Great, thank you. Then next, Antonio. Antonio, are you still here, or have we lost you to the ether of the internet?
It seems that we have lost Antonio, unfortunately.
Okay, he's gone gaming, perhaps. So that we will move next to Cilene.
The classroom, of course, that I am speaking as a professor. And what I have seen is it's a lot of a good example at the end of an academic semester. For example, right now, my students are producing news, podcast, web stories on the lifespan of climate change in vulnerable territories. And I wanted to mention the importance of the leaders, the community leaders, for example, the leaders of Heliópolis favela. Young people are a real example for the slogan, leave no one behind. They are fighting, for example, in their community to avoid the impacts of COVID-19. And their main struggle is to provide food and a dignity for the members of their community. I'd like to remember, I'd like to highlight this example to maybe to build more hope for the UN and for ourselves. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thanks, a great word, hope, I love it. Maria, your 1 minute takeaway.
Okay, well, once again, what I've noticed in a discussion with the people from different backgrounds about different topics that do connect in the end is that there's so many things I myself have not thought about. And I can really imagine that even although the UN or any kind of government or institution is a collective of a lot of people, of a lot of very educated people, and very different minds, there can be even more contribution from people that are not in the UN. So when thinking that maybe the information that we exchange today could be also exchanged internally in the UN, and that there could be a program maybe where people regularly, even maybe a farmer from the middle of Greece somewhere could go and say, okay, this is what I need, maybe you could think about this a bit more, would be really good, because sometimes when you're in a discussion table all the time, there's things that you don't see. So this is what I take away from the discussion, the amount of things that we don't know.
Thank you. And lastly, Helen, what would be your message to us at the end today?
Well, I'd like to build on the idea of hope by issuing a call to action. And I think that call to action involves finding our collaborators. That probably means looking locally, but it also means looking globally to try to find the people that we can possibly work with towards goals of sustainability and better global governance. But in that, from my perspective at least, we should never forget the power of the imagination as a force in social life. And my background is theatre and performance studies, and I'm really keen on challenging people to think beyond words to the whole range of the senses and the way that we can communicate, possibly across cultures, certainly across different social groups, to find some of those collaborations that might work in a specific and concrete way. And I'd just like to end with a call to action for those listening, to think about what you can do in your own work and in your own social life to find and give spark to that idea of the imagination, because I think that's what may give us hope, and it will certainly give us resilience and the sense of solidarity that we need to find some solutions, or at least a way of weathering some of the seemingly intractable problems that the world faces.
Thanks, Helen. And I need to apologize to Piera because of my messy notes. I missed her in the speaking order, but that means you have the last word. So Piera.
That's okay. It's good for me. Great. I love that. Something I definitely took away, and sort of a word that I was brought back to during these conversations, is omnilateralism. And that is the movement towards comprehensive global governance. But what it's sort of translated to as well is for all, by all. So that involves us. That involves us, the people, and our stories. So let us look for solutions and strategies, developmental and creative, to work together to build a sustainable future. So for me, I'm looking forward to next year's UN's International Year of Creative Economy for Sustainable Development, and how they will and can use arts and culture to translate policy into something that is humanistic and something we can all understand.
All right, thank you very much, everyone. I think we've had a really good discussion. I had one closing thought before I hand the floor back to Yoriko, which is, and I don't want to sound Kennedy-esque, in the sense that, to me, it's not so much what the UN can do for you that we need to focus on in this time. It's not so much what you can do for the UN, but what you can do for the world. And governments and the UN respond to public pressure. They need more public pressure to do what needs to be done. And I can only encourage all of you who are activists in your various areas of interest to keep plugging away, keep putting pressure on, forcing governments to do things that they wouldn't otherwise do. Otherwise, they'll listen to other people's voices. And we need to be present, and we need to have our say. And to me, that's the essence of global citizenship. It contributes to sustainability, and it means we can make a contribution to the governance institutions. So with that, I'll close, pass the floor to Yoriko, and maybe Yorgos wants to come in with a parting word at the end.
Yes, thanks, Richard. And thanks again to everybody. It's been a really rich and interesting discussion. And I hope that colleagues at the UN have been listening, or if not now, they'll have a chance to watch this, because when you're working within the UN system, you do end up gazing at your own navel so much of the time, and you end up losing curiosity about the outside world. So I hope that this is a challenge for our colleagues to be more curious, to reach out further and much more broadly to the world. So thank you so much.
So let me also have one word here. We've reached the end of our event. Apologies to those whose questions we could not take. There were many. Thank you very much for your active participation. Heartfelt thanks to our amazing speakers for sharing their diverse experiences and ideas with us. We'll certainly try to follow up on the many possibilities of cooperation in new projects that surfaced in the discussion, a lot to do with stories, games, and the arts, in order to better the world, as our title said. Many thanks also to our co-chairs and to all of you on the Zoom call and on Facebook. You heard the call to action by all and for all. We count on your active engagement and support for a better UN and a better world. Happy UN Day tomorrow.